Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for showing up today. Thank you for supporting Congressman Jerry Moran. Jerry, as you know, represents 69 of Kansas's 105 counties. He's a tireless worker and a great guy. So without further ado, it's an honor to introduce our next U.S. Senator.
I was visiting, I was listening to Jim DeMint visit with the press. I thought maybe they'd ask me a question or two, but they were focused on him. I understand that. But then I came, and my wife came and got me from that huddle of press and says, Jerry, the people are getting restless. They want to get this thing started. You need to get in here. They want to hear Jim DeMint. Even my wife put me in my place just moments ago. So I'll take that admonition, that instruction seriously, and I'll leave my remarks to be very brief. But I'm honored that you would be here. I'm honored that you would take time out of your day this Friday to be here in Olathe and to spend some time with a person who hopes to represent you and represent you well in our nation's capital. I've had a real privilege of representing Kansans in Washington, D.C. There's nothing in my background that would ever suggest I grew up to be a member of Congress. I just happened to be a kid who got interested in history and government biography. I started reading things and began to believe that there are certain principles by which we ought to be governed that will make America the place we know it can be. And the challenge we face today is I think most Americans recognize that the direction that we're going is not the place that's going to, it's not the path that's going to take America to where we need to be.
That's right.
I just was asked a One of the reporters that did ask me a question wanted to know what a Kansas conservative was. And my response was that I think when you bring the word Kansas in front of conservative, what that means is we bring common sense and good judgment, and we take a long-term view. We look at the future. When I talk to Kansans about what they want from Washington, D.C., it's almost never about themselves. It's more like, look what you people are doing in Washington that's going to diminish the lives of our children and grandchildren. It's the long-term view that Kansans want. As the word conservative, what it means to me is that government closest to home, closest to the people, is better than that government that's far away in Washington.
That's right.
I think it means that we cannot spend money we don't have. And I think it means that we have barred ourselves with the belief that it will lead us to prosperity, and that is a false hope. And in fact, it is our living beyond our means that we are trying to recover from today.
That's exactly.
And you cannot recover from that by more borrowing and more spending. It will not work. As my wife said, you're anxious to hear Jim DeMint. And I am honored that he would be here. I'm appreciative of his support. I don't know that there is a person that you can look to who is in leadership in Washington, D.C. today that more firmly stands with their commitments to their views, their philosophy, and their constituents, and has that long-term Kansas conservative point of view than a senator from South Carolina. It is a pleasure for me to introduce him. The thing I appreciate and respect so much about Jim DeMint is that he is willing to tackle tough issues, and he's willing to do it with his principles, not having his arm twisted by Republican leaders or by his colleagues. He is one of those people who stands firm and tall every day. I know Jim well enough to know that it wears on him. You ought to let him know how much you appreciate that, because in Washington, D.C., they're always trying to change us. They're always trying to get us to fit the mold of what we're supposed to be in Washington, D.C. from their perspective, not our perspective. So if you would applaud Jim's presence in Kansas, and if you would let him know how much you appreciate his firm commitment to returning America to the place that we all know it can be and should be. Please welcome Jim DeMint.
Thank you, Jim! Thank you! Thank you! Thank you!
That have the guy who introduced you tell the crowd to applaud. That's great. It's good to be home in a way. I want to introduce Paul Crider. Paul, put up your hand over. He's my cousin. My dad's from Kansas. Grew up in Raymond, Kansas. I told Jerry. I want to go to Raymond. And he said, you know, you need to spend a couple of days here if we're going to get over to Raymond.
Does anybody in this audience know where Raymond is?
It's near Hutchinson. But I've got 3 aunts still alive who live in Lawrence. That's not too far.
We know where that one is.
We know where that is. But my dad was born and raised here in